The origin of consciousness is one of the most compelling lines of evidence for the existence of God. The next 5 minutes will show you why. Have you ever looked out at the sky and contemplated your own existence? At some point in your life, you may have worried about the future and even considered your own death. What are you thinking about right now? It probably has something to do with this video. A minute ago, you may have been thinking about what to have for lunch or which household chores you need to do. Every day, millions of thoughts pass through our minds, some of them brief and unimportant, others challenging and worthy of plenty of time and attention. But have you ever wondered, where did the ability to think come from in the first place? While your body is running countless operations at any given second, breathing, pumping blood, sensing the world around you, digesting food, and so forth, all of those can be accounted for as natural occurrences. Most creatures perform such operations without any conscious thought. But what about the thoughts which are conscious? What about the ideas that pass through your mind each second? How did we develop the ability to process and perceive these thoughts? The fact is, we are conscious beings. But what is consciousness? Consciousness is the fact that the mind is aware of itself and the world around it. It is not merely intelligence, as animals have intelligence and even technology can give us artificial intelligence. It is intelligence plus rationality, awareness, and abstract thinking. How can evolution explain such consciousness? In theory, over billions of years, we developed from nothing into conscious beings. Non-life became life, which eventually became sentient, intelligent life. How did we get from nothing to where we are right now? A moment in which you are hearing these words and watching this video and forming your thoughts in response to it. The naturalist worldview on which evolution is based says that the physical universe is all we have. But in this framework, humans are essentially living, breathing computers who amount to little more than bodies that operate solely by biological operations. So, consciousness would have had to develop itself. This theory states that over time, as organisms evolved into more complex creatures, at some point along the way, self-awareness developed. One explanation holds that consciousness is just a natural outworking of our neurons, competing for attention. Whatever is stimulating the brain the most takes precedence and comes to the forefront of our mental processes. One of the biggest problems with a naturalistic explanation is this: the whole of the body is clearly greater than the sum of its parts. The fact that we can learn, reason, perceive, and think abstractly shows we are not just material creatures. There is no place in the body a surgeon can open up and point to as the center of consciousness. Yes, the brain directs what consciousness we have, but our thoughts are not naturally occurring phenomena, which can be explained in the way that sensations can be, through the firing of neurons across synapses. In other words, we have a natural explanation for how the brain processes information, but we have no such natural explanation for how the brain perceives the information. Every thought the brain has in this discussion about consciousness is a thought it is having about itself. We can speak of how we occupy our bodies, but who is saying that? Who is doing the occupying? It is our conscious mind that clearly perceives itself separately from the body's purely physical aspects. The brain and the mind, in this sense, are two separate factors. A body with a brain can be taught to eat food and even sense its sweet, salty, sour, or bitter taste. But without a conscious mind, we cannot formulate thoughts as to how we liked or disliked the food. We could be taught to throw a ball, but the mental calculations involved in determining velocity, direction, and arm angle required to get the ball to its target require conscious thought. Coincidentally, we can process the information as to how all of this works, but to understand it we need such conscious thought. There is a second level of operation involved in all of these processes, beyond the mere electrical system of the brain. Naturalism cannot account for this mind-body split. If evolution were true, it would have an explanation for how unintelligent, unconscious organisms gave rise to beings who can hear these discussions and think them through. So, how do we explain the origin of consciousness? How did we as creatures gain this ability? The clearest, most logical conclusion is that consciousness is not something we developed. It's something we were given. We were created by a conscious being, and that being gave us not only the bodies we occupy and the brains they contain, but the mind and its consciousness. If there is no God, such consciousness would not be possible. There would be no mechanism for a development of awareness alongside purely physiological functions. But with a God, it is perfectly reasonable to see why such a being would want to create creatures who are not just highly advanced animals, but are reasoning, logical creatures who can be conscientious of him and the world around themselves. You may disagree, but this leaves you with an enormous burden of proof that you must be able to answer, and that is, how are you able to contemplate what is being said here, and how are you even able to disagree? If you want to learn more about the lines of evidence that prove the biblical worldview, please visit linesofevidence.com.